Beloved friend, there are moments in life when the heart begins to ask a question that cannot be ignored. Has God truly called me, or is this only my own desire? And if you are asking that question, listen carefully, because that question itself is often the beginning of something sacred. And a true calling from God is never born from ambition alone. It is not something you manufacture, nor something you force into existence. It is something that begins deep within your spirit, quietly, persistently, and sometimes even uncomfortably. It is a holy pressure that does not leave you the same. And let me ask you, when you think about the things of God, when you draw near to Him in prayer, does your heart become sensitive? Do you feel a deep pull, not toward recognition, not toward success, but toward obedience, toward surrender, toward becoming more like Him? That inner drawing is not accidental. God does not call casually. When He calls, He draws. But listen, God's call will always separate you from certain things. It will cost you. It will refine you. It will strip away pride, self-reliance, and anything that stands in the way of His presence. If what you feel requires no sacrifice, no surrender, no transformation, then be careful, because the true call of God always leads you into a deeper dependency on Him. And yet, there is another sign, a quieter one. And when God calls you, there is often a burden you cannot explain. A holy burden, a burden for people, a burden for truth, a burden for souls. You may find yourself weeping over things others ignore. You may feel deeply when others remain unaffected. That is not weakness. That is not emotional instability. That is a mark of God's hand upon your life. But let me speak plainly to your heart. God's calling is never about you alone. It is never about building your name, your platform, or your identity. It is about Him. If your focus is on what you will gain, you may have missed the essence of His call. But if your heart cries, Lord, whatever you want, wherever you send me, I will go, then something divine is already taking place within you. And then sometimes God confirms His call through doors that open and doors that close. Through delay, through waiting, through seasons where nothing seems to move. Do not despise those moments, because in those hidden seasons, God is shaping your character to carry what He is preparing for you. And a true calling is not proven by excitement alone. It is proven by endurance, by faithfulness in the unseen, by obedience when no one is watching, by a heart that refuses to let go of God, even when everything else is unclear. And so I ask you today, what is in your spirit? What is stirring within you that you cannot shake? Is there a longing for God that grows stronger even when you try to ignore it? Is there a quiet knowing deep inside that says, I was created for more than this, I was created for Him? And do not rush this process. Do not compare your journey with others. God does not call everyone in the same way, but He always calls with purpose, with intention, and with power. And then remember this. If God has truly called you, He will also equip you. He will sustain you. He will guide you step by step. You do not have to figure everything out today. You only need to obey today. There is a quiet but undeniable awareness that begins to grow within the heart of someone who is being drawn by God. It is not loud, and it is not forceful in the way the world often expects important things to feel. Instead, it is gentle, persistent, and deeply personal. This inner witness does not depend on external validation, nor does it wait for the approval of people. It is something that settles within the spirit, creating a sense of direction that cannot easily be ignored or dismissed. You may try to move away from it, to distract yourself, or to convince yourself that it is only your imagination, but it continues to return. Like a quiet voice that speaks in the stillness of your heart, and this inward pull often begins with a deep awareness of God's presence. When you draw near to Him in prayer, there is a sense of clarity, even if circumstances around you remain uncertain. The desire to seek Him becomes stronger than the desire to seek answers about your future. In those moments, something within you begins to align with His will, even if you do not fully understand what that will is. It is as if your spirit recognizes something familiar, something eternal, something that resonates beyond your natural understanding, and this inner witness is not driven by emotion alone. Emotions can fluctuate, but this awareness remains steady beneath the surface. Even when feelings fade, even when doubts arise, there is still a knowing that refuses to completely disappear. It is this consistency that separates a passing desire from a genuine drawing by God. You may question it, you may wrestle with it, but it does not leave you. Instead, it continues to press gently upon your heart, inviting you into a deeper place of trust and surrender, and often, this inner witness begins to shape your thoughts and priorities. What once seemed important may begin to lose its appeal, while things that once felt distant begin to matter more deeply. Your heart becomes sensitive to spiritual things in a way it was not before. You may find yourself reflecting more on your purpose, your path, and your relationship with God. These thoughts are not random. They are part of the process through which God draws your attention away from the temporary and toward the eternal. And there is also a quiet conviction that comes with this inner witness. It is not condemnation, but rather a gentle urging toward truth. It may correct your direction, challenge your motives, and refine your desires. It is not harsh, but it is honest. And in that honesty, there is a deep sense of love. Because when God draws a person, he does so not to confuse them, but to lead them into clarity, even if the path to that clarity requires patience and waiting, and over time, this inner witness becomes more recognizable. You begin to understand that this is not something you created, nor something you can easily explain to others. It is something that belongs to the relationship between you and God alone. And the more you respond to it, the stronger and clearer it becomes. It shapes your decisions, influences your steps, and begins to align your life with a purpose that is greater than your own understanding. When God places a calling upon a life, it never elevates the individual above others in pride or self-importance. Instead, it humbles the heart and draws it into a place of surrender. There is a noticeable shift within the inner life of a person who is truly being called. The focus begins to move away from personal recognition, from applause, from validation, and from the desire to be seen or celebrated. In its place, there grows a quiet desire to serve, to obey, and to be hidden in the will of God. This is not something that is forced or imitated, but something that develops naturally as the heart comes under the influence of God's presence. And there is a clear distinction between ambition and calling. Ambition often seeks to build something for self, gain to create identity through achievement, and to rise in the eyes of others. But a true calling from God leads in the opposite direction. It leads a person into deeper humility, where the realization grows that without God, nothing of lasting value can be accomplished. This awareness does not weaken the individual, rather, it strengthens them in the right way. Because their strength is no longer dependent on their own ability, but on God's power working through them, and as surrender deepens, the heart becomes more sensitive to obedience. Even small instructions from God begin to carry weight. There is a growing awareness that what matters most is not what is impressive in the eyes of people, but what is pleasing in the eyes of God. This creates a shift in priorities. The desire to be known begins to fade, while the desire to be faithful becomes stronger. You may find yourself choosing the quiet place over the public platform, the secret place over the visible one, because in your spirit, you begin to understand that true calling is cultivated in surrender, not in self. Promotion and surrender is not always comfortable. It often requires letting go of plans, expectations, and even personal dreams. Yet within that letting go, there is a deeper gain, intimacy with God. As you release control, you begin to experience His guidance in a more personal and meaningful way. The more you surrender, the more you recognize that His ways are higher, His thoughts are purer, and His direction is more trustworthy than anything you could devise on your own. And a person who is truly called by God does not cling tightly to their own identity. Instead, they yield it. They allow God to shape them, to mold them, and to redefine them according to His purpose. This process may involve correction, redirection, and even seasons where everything feels uncertain. But in those moments, surrender becomes the anchor that keeps the heart steady. Because when you are surrendered to God, you are no longer striving to maintain control. You are resting in His sovereignty, and in that place of surrender, something powerful begins to happen. The life that once sought its own direction begins to flow in alignment with God's will. The person who once tried to lead now learns to follow. The heart that once sought recognition now seeks obedience. And in that quiet transformation, the true nature of a divine calling is revealed, not through outward recognition, but through inward submission to the voice and will of God. A true calling from God is never without cost, and it is never without refinement. When God places His hand upon a life, He begins a process that gently yet firmly shapes that person into what is necessary for the assignment He has prepared. This shaping is not always comfortable, because it requires letting go of things that once felt secure, familiar, and even essential. But within that process, there is a divine intention to remove anything that cannot carry the weight of His presence, and sacrifice is often the first sign that God is at work in this way. You may begin to notice that certain comforts are being challenged, certain attachments are being loosened, and certain desires are being redirected. What once seemed harmless may begin to feel like a distraction. What once felt important may begin to lose its hold on your heart. This is not loss in the way the world understands it. It is refinement. It is God gently removing what is unnecessary, so that what remains can be purified and strengthened, and refinement often takes place in hidden seasons. These are moments when it feels as though nothing significant is happening, yet in reality, deep work is being done within the soul. It is in these unseen places that God deals with the heart, tests motives, and strengthens character. You may feel overlooked or even forgotten. But those are often the very moments when God is preparing you for something greater than what you currently understand, and there is also a testing of endurance. When a calling is real, it will be tested through time, through patience, and through waiting. Not everything will happen immediately, and not every door will open when you expect it to. These delays are not signs of rejection, but opportunities for growth. They reveal whether your trust in God is dependent on circumstances or rooted in a deeper conviction that He is faithful, even when nothing seems to be changing. And in the process of refinement, God also confronts areas within you that need transformation. This may include pride, fear, insecurity, or even hidden motives that you are not fully aware of. These confrontations are not meant to harm you, but to heal you, because God cannot entrust His calling to a heart that has not been refined. He desires to work through a vessel that is willing to be corrected, shaped, and aligned with His will. And as you move through these seasons, you begin to realize that sacrifice is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. Because every time you surrender something, you gain something far greater in return, greater sensitivity to His voice, greater awareness of His presence, and greater alignment with His purpose. The things you once held tightly begin to lose their grip, and in their place, a deeper dependence on God begins to grow, and this process also reveals the strength that comes from relying on God alone. When your own resources are no longer enough, you begin to see how sufficient He truly is. You learn to trust Him in ways you could not have understood without going through the refining process. And in that trust, there is a quiet confidence that begins to form within you, a confidence not in your own ability, but in His faithfulness to complete what He has started, and through it all, you begin to understand that the cost is not a burden to be avoided, but a pathway to becoming the person God has designed you to be, shaped, strengthened, and prepared to carry what He has placed upon your life. There is something unmistakable that begins to stir within a person whom God is calling, a burden that cannot be explained by natural reasoning alone. It is not simply a passing concern or a temporary emotion, but a deep, enduring weight placed upon the heart. This burden often centers around people, truth, and the things that matter to God. It may feel heavy at times, yet it is not meant to crush you. It is meant to draw you closer to the very heart of God, to align your spirit with His compassion, His righteousness, and His desire to reach those who are lost, hurting, and searching, and this burden often expresses itself through sensitivity. You may find yourself moved by things that others seem to overlook. Situations that do not affect others deeply may stir something within you. This is not a weakness, but a sign that your heart is being tuned to the frequency of God's concern. He does not remain indifferent to human suffering, and when He calls someone, He places within them a reflection of His own heart. That reflection may come in the form of compassion, a desire to help, or a longing to see lives transformed, and alongside this sensitivity comes a growing awareness of truth. You begin to value what is right, what is pure, and what is aligned with God's word. There is a resistance that forms within you toward anything that distorts truth or leads people away from it. This is not about judgment in the human sense, but about a deep conviction that truth matters and that lives depend on it. When God entrusts a calling to someone, He also entrusts them with a responsibility to uphold and carry His truth with integrity, and this burden is not something that you can easily ignore. In fact, when you try to set it aside, it often returns. It follows you into your thoughts, into your prayers, and into moments of quiet reflection. It is not intrusive, but it is persistent. It becomes a part of your inner life, shaping your perspective and influencing the way you see the world around you. And over time, you begin to realize that this burden is not a random feeling, but a divine imprint, and there is also a sense of responsibility that accompanies this burden. You begin to understand that what you carry is not for your benefit alone. It is something entrusted to you for the sake of others. This realization brings a shift in your mindset. Life is no longer just about personal goals or individual success, but about purpose that extends beyond yourself. You start to see your life in the context of something greater, something that has eternal significance, and within this burden, there is also a quiet compassion that grows. A compassion that does not judge quickly, but seeks to understand. A compassion that desires to lift others rather than condemn them. This is a reflection of the heart of God, who is patient, loving, and deeply concerned for every soul. As this compassion grows within you, it begins to shape your actions, your words, and your decisions, and the burden may not always be easy to carry, but it is a clear indication that God is at work within you, shaping you, preparing you, and drawing you into alignment with His purpose in a way that reaches beyond your own understanding. There are seasons in the life of someone who is being called by God where nothing seems to move forward, and yet everything is being shaped in ways that cannot be immediately seen. These are the seasons of waiting and testing, and they are not a sign of delay in God's plan, but a sign of preparation. In these quiet and sometimes difficult moments, God is doing a deep and careful work within the heart, refining motives, strengthening faith, and building a foundation that will be able to sustain what He intends to release later, and waiting is often misunderstood. It can feel like inactivity, as though nothing meaningful is happening. But in reality, waiting is one of the most active processes in God's work. It is during these times that patience is developed, trust is tested, and dependence on God is deepened. When everything is moving slowly or not at all, you are given an opportunity to examine where your confidence truly lies. If your peace depends on visible progress, then waiting will challenge you. But if your peace is rooted in God Himself, then waiting becomes a place of rest rather than frustration, and testing is closely connected to waiting. It reveals what is truly within the heart. Circumstances may arise that challenge your faith, your commitment, and your obedience. You may find yourself in situations where you have to choose between what is easy and what is right, between what is comfortable and what is faithful. These moments are not random. They are carefully allowed to reveal the strength of your devotion and the sincerity of your calling, and during these seasons, God often remains silent in ways that can feel uncomfortable. You may seek answers, direction, or confirmation, and yet hear nothing. But this silence is not absence. It is presence in a deeper form. It is in these moments that you learn to trust God not because of what you hear, but because of who He is. Your relationship with Him becomes less dependent on signs and more grounded in faith, and waiting also develops endurance. A calling that is genuine must be able to withstand time. It must be able to endure delays, opposition, and uncertainty. Without endurance, even the most sincere calling can be weakened. But when you learn to remain steady in seasons of waiting, you develop a resilience that prepares you for the responsibilities ahead. This endurance becomes part of your spiritual strength, shaping your ability to remain faithful even when circumstances do not align with your expectations, and in these times, your perspective begins to shift. You begin to see that God is not in a hurry, because He is not limited by time. His timing is perfect, even when it does not match your own sense of urgency. This realization brings a quiet surrender. You start to release your need to control the pace of your life and begin to trust that God is guiding every step, even when the path is not fully visible, and these seasons are not wasted time. They are sacred spaces where God prepares you for what is to come, shaping your character, deepening your faith, and aligning your heart with His purpose in ways that only waiting and testing can accomplish. A genuine calling from God does not remain at the level of emotion or excitement alone. It ultimately produces a life of obedience. Excitement can come and go, feelings can rise and fall, but obedience reveals the true state of the heart. When God calls a person, He is not merely inviting them to feel something deeply, but to respond in action. There is a transition that takes place where hearing becomes doing, and understanding becomes yielding. This is where the reality of the calling is confirmed, not in words spoken, but in steps taken in faith, and obedience often requires stepping into the unknown. It may not always make sense to the natural mind, and it may not always be supported by the opinions of others. In fact, true obedience frequently stands in contrast to what is comfortable or popular. Yet there is a quiet assurance that begins to grow within the heart of someone who is truly called. It is an assurance that says, even when I do not fully understand, I can trust the one who is leading me. This trust becomes the foundation for obedience, allowing a person to move forward even when clarity is incomplete, and there is also a sense of urgency that comes with obedience. When God speaks, there is a recognition that His voice carries authority, and His instructions are not to be delayed or ignored. Delayed obedience can weaken sensitivity to His voice, while immediate obedience strengthens it. Over time, you begin to recognize that responding quickly to God is not about perfection, but about alignment. It is about keeping your heart in a posture that is ready to follow, ready to listen, and ready to move when He directs, and obedience also reveals priorities. When God calls you to something, your willingness to obey demonstrates where your true loyalty lies. It is easy to agree with God in words, but obedience requires action that reflects that agreement. This may involve changing direction, letting go of plans, or embracing something that challenges your comfort. In these moments, obedience becomes a choice that must be made repeatedly, shaping your character and defining your path, and as obedience becomes a pattern in your life, something begins to change within you. Your sensitivity to God's voice increases. You become more aware of His leading in both small and significant matters. What once felt difficult begins to feel natural, because your heart is becoming accustomed to following His direction. Obedience transforms from an obligation into a response of trust and love, and there is also a quiet joy that emerges through obedience. Not always a loud or emotional joy, but a deep sense of peace that comes from knowing you are aligned with God's will. This peace does not depend on circumstances, but on the confidence that you are walking in step with Him, even when the path is challenging. There is a steadiness within you that comes from knowing you are where He wants you to be, and in this place, obedience becomes more than a requirement. It becomes a relationship. a living, ongoing response to the voice of God, where each step forward is guided by trust, shaped by surrender, and sustained by a heart that desires to follow Him fully, no matter where He leads.